Have you ever really stopped to think about how a language breathes and changes? Well, today we're going to dive into a massive shift happening in Japanese, and it's a story you can see just by looking at two simple words.
So, on one hand, you've got pan, which means bread. It's a loan word from Portuguese. And on the other, you've got sabasuku, meaning subscription, from English. At first glance, you might think, what's the big deal? They're both foreign words, right? But believe me, these two words tell the story of two completely different Japans and two totally different relationships with the rest of the world. So how do we get from one to the other?
To really solve this puzzle, we have to become time travelers. Our journey is going to take us through three distinct eras of modern Japan: the Showa era, the Heisei era, and the one we're in right now, the Reiwa era. Each one left its own unique fingerprint on the language.
All right, first up, the Showa era. Let's call this the era of modern things.
Back in the Showa period, these foreign words, they were like shiny new objects from another world. They almost always represented physical products and Western ideas that just felt incredibly modern. And you gotta remember, most writing was still vertical back then. So when you saw these foreign words written horizontally, they really jumped off the page. They were a symbol of a whole new way of life.
And the words themselves, they tell the story, don't they? Pan for bread, radio for radio, terebi for television. They're all about tangible things you could touch. Even new social ideas like the sarariman, the salaryman, was a very concrete concept that helped define a modernizing society. Okay, let's jump forward in time. We're now entering the Heisei era, or the business buzz.
In this era, something changed. These loanwords, they basically broke out of the home and marched straight into the office. This was all driven by the rise of personal computers, right? So terms from English user interfaces, they became impossible to avoid. And suddenly, using these words in ads and on TV wasn't just descriptive, it was cool, it was sophisticated. And as PCs took over, so did horizontal writing, making these words feel even more natural.
And this is where you see a really fascinating shift towards more abstract ideas. Think about it. We go from a simple product like bread to konbini, a convenience store. That's an entire system of consumption. We go from a salaryman to risutora, restructuring. That's a complex and often painful economic process. And of course, tech terms like pasakon for PC and kriku for click became part of everyone's daily life.
And that brings us right up to today, the Reiwa era, the digital default.
In the Reiwa era, well, the floodgates are wide open. The language is now totally dominated by terms from IT, social media, and big global concepts. Even the government uses them all the time. But here is the critical difference. For a lot of these new words, there just isn't a simple, elegant Japanese equivalent. To talk about the modern world, these words are no longer a choice, they're essential.
And that brings us full circle, back to sabusuku, subscription. Just look at this list: remote work, diversity, sustainability. These aren't just names for new things anymore. They are the names for the very systems, the very values that structure modern life itself. They've become the new foundation.
So let's put all the pieces together. This is the big reveal, the great word shift.
Here it is, laid out plain and simple. What we've seen is loanwords migrating from the edges of Japanese life to the absolute center. It all started in the Showa era with new things for daily life. It moved in the Heisei era to new concepts for society and business. And now, in the Reiwa era, these words describe the very infrastructure that we all depend on.
You know, you can actually see this evolution perfectly in what you might call a generational change flow, where one kind of loanword basically paves the way for the next. Let me show you exactly what I mean.
Let's take consumption. The Showa era gave us a physical product, pan, or bread. The Heisei era gave us a whole system for buying things, the konbini. And now, the Reiwa era gives us a completely abstract digital model, subsaku. You see that? From a thing, to a place, to a service.
Or how about the world of work? Same pattern. The Showa era defined a new type of worker, the salaryman. Heisei introduced a new economic process, risutora, or restructuring. And Reiwa has given us a whole new work infrastructure, remotowaku, remote work. Again, from a person to a process to an entire infrastructure.
And one last example, just to really drive it home. Technology. It starts in Showa with the physical rekudo, or record. That evolves in Heisei to the CD. And finally, in Reiwa, the physical object vanishes completely, replaced by streaming, streaming. The progression is, well, it's undeniable.
So what's the big takeaway here? Why does any of this matter? Because it's about so much more than just a few new words.
You know, this quote from our source material just nails it. This great word shift isn't random at all. It actually maps out a very clear journey, from importing physical things to adopting new social and economic systems to, finally, plugging directly into a global digital infrastructure.
And this is probably the most important idea of all. These words aren't just passively reflecting change, they are actively enabling it. By adopting this global vocabulary, the Japanese language itself is speeding up the country's integration into a digital-first world. In a way, the words themselves are building this new reality.
And that leaves us with one last, kind of mind-bending question. We started with bread, and we ended with subscriptions. So when foreign words are no longer just for flair or for naming new objects, but they become the essential, unavoidable foundation for how we talk about work, society, and technology, what does that really mean for the future of a language? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me.